So, I recently watched From Up on Poppy Hill, and now I want to discuss it. So if you were looking for an in-depth extensive analysis about this film, well, this ain't it. But even so, I hope you'll stick around and settle for whatever this is. Enjoy. From Up on Poppy Hill is a 2011 Japanese animated drama from Studio Ghibli and directed by Goro Miyazaki. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because this guy is this guy's son. The story follows high schooler Umi Matsuzaki, also known as Meru, and her classmates as they strive to keep their school's clubhouse from being demolished. I'm going to be straightforward. I actually really like this film. I think it's one of the more underrated and overlooked films to come from Studio Ghibli. It's not my favorite to say, but I think people should give it a chance. It may not have the epic scope or fantastical elements of other Ghibli's works, but I think it still captures their charm. One thing that might turn some people off is how slow the film might feel. The runtime is just over an hour and a half, but it felt like 2 hours to me. This is most likely due to the film being a drama, so there's less going on action-wise. I personally didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was kinda nice to watch something that was feel-good and vibey. I don't always need action to keep me engaged in the film, but those who need something flashy or over the top to keep their attention may not find this film all that interesting. The animation was of course superb, as expected with Studio Ghibli. Although, I feel like From Up on Poppy Hill does not do the studio justice to display what they are capable of doing. There aren't any crazy transformations or rapid moving shots, as this film is on the more tranquil end of the spectrum. Probably the most impressively animated segments come from the scene where tens of students are cleaning the clubhouse. In those shots, we can see multiple different tasks being carried out all at once on the same screen. We even see some of the students being expressive while doing so. The soundtrack was probably my favorite aspect of the film, which is saying a lot since I'm a big fan of Joe Hisaishi and his compositions. This one wasn't done by him though, but instead by Satoshi Takebe. It really sets the atmosphere of this 1960s Japanese high school. Some tracks are actually quite catchy on their own, especially the ones featuring vocalist Aoi Teshima. I honestly think that this is one of Ghibli's more unique soundtracks, and is making its way to becoming one of my favorites from the studio. Every time I hear music from this film, it makes me want to go back and rewatch it. There was one thing I sorta had an issue with. This is gonna be a bit to explain, so bear with me. Also, spoiler warning. So, our two main protagonists, Meru and Shun, start getting chummy with each other as they work to fix up the clubhouse. Shun eventually goes over to Meru's place for a get-together, but while he's there, Meru shows him a picture of 3 sailors, one of which is her late father, Sawamura. She tells Shun how fond of him she was, and how he taught her how to use signal flags. Well, later, when Shun goes home, he pulls out the same photo. This makes me initially think, Are they siblings?
Uh-oh.
But I try not to jump to any conclusions. It's only the first act. There must be some sort of explanation for it. His father could just be one of the other sailors. Shun then confronts his adopted father, Kazama, about the dilemma, asking him if Sawamura is his father. Kazama then gives one of the most ambiguous responses he could have given. He essentially tells Shun that Sawamura arrived on his doorstep one night and offered him and his wife baby Shun. Sawamura doesn't say if it's his or not, and Kazama barely makes an attempt to find out anything further. Kazama concludes that even though Shun is not his biological son, he is still his son. Look, I know this is somewhat of a touching moment, but it doesn't answer the question! And Shun doesn't even care, he's just like, okay, thanks dad. Poor Meru has no idea what's going on in Shun's head and is given a cold shoulder as he tries to figure everything out. Shun then discovers that he was registered as a Sawamura when he was born, possibly meaning that they are brother and sister. He tells Meru this, and they decide to remain friends and to forget their feelings for each other. Meru is able to hide her feelings, but becomes sorta depressed. Meru's mother, Ryoko, who has been in the US during all of this, finally comes home and gives us the answers we've been craving. She tells Meru that Shun was in fact the son of one of the other sailors in the picture, but he died in a battle, and his wife during childbirth. Sawamura registered Shun under his name because he would have been sent to an orphanage otherwise. Although Ryoko was already pregnant with Meru, so they couldn't take him in. Thus, Sawamura gave him up to Kazama. That should have put everything to rest. That was a good enough explanation. But friggin' Meru still has her doubts, and she still thinks that her and Shun could be siblings. The last remaining sailor in the picture eventually turns up and confirms everything to Meru and Shun. My problem with all of this is, it could have been easily avoided if Shun's dad was a little more insistent on getting answers on his to-be son. If they wanted to stay with this storyline, I feel like the obstacles should have been a little more thought out. But this film was adapted from a manga, so maybe they were just trying to be faithful to it. I don't know. I swear, despite my complaints, I still really like this film, and perhaps my issue with it is just me being nitpicky. It is a film after all, so everything shouldn't be taken too seriously, and not everything has to be realistic. Backtracking a bit, I think the scene where Meru and Shun meet up with the last sailor is actually heartwarming. He was only in one scene, but him saying that meeting Meru and Shun was like seeing his closest friends again moved me a little bit. I liked how that moment gives him some closure and clarifies everything for Meru and Shun. This film was Goro Miyazaki's second time as a director, and from what I've seen, he's had it kinda rough. I haven't seen his first film, Tales from Earthsea, but I've heard many refer to it as Ghibli's worst film. I honestly feel bad for Goro. He was sort of pressured to start directing in one of the most prestigious studios in animation, despite any filmmaking experience. He's been thrown under the shadow of his father, which is a heavy burden itself. It doesn't help that Hayao is very cold towards Goro as a filmmaker, being very critical of him and disapproving of his work. Goro may not be as gifted of a filmmaker as his father, but I do think he has potential to be a good one. From Up on Poppy Hill is proof of that. Goro eventually went on to direct the Prime Video series Ronya, the Robber's Daughter, and the upcoming film Earwig and the Witch, both of which are now on my watch list after viewing From Up on Poppy Hill. If you haven't seen this film yet, sorry for spoiling a lot. I just wanted to shed some light on this underappreciated animation. I know it's not as good as other Ghibli films, but I think it's a nice watch and deserves some recognition. But don't take my word for it, you should go watch it for yourself. Unless you've already seen it. Then rewatch it. Unless you didn't like it. Then I guess watch something else. Okay, bye.